Letter Roman 2, journey to Metz. A day spent at Metz. Proceed to Trèves. Enter Prussia, Trèves. Voyage down the Moselle. Slow steamboat up the Rhine to Mayence. Railroad to Frankfurt by Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley. We left Paris on the 25th of June at 6 in the evening and were 37 hours reaching Metz, a distance of about 200 miles, stopping only for half an hour at a time, and that only twice during the one day we were on the road. I suffered excessive fatigue during the 2 nights of this journey, partly on account of a cough I caught at Paris, but my health was not in the slightest degree hurt. The weather was very fine. The country we passed through was beautiful, abundant in corn and vines, then in midsummer luxuriance. There was a portion of those dull, vast plains, so usual in France, but for the most part the country was varied into hill and dale, arable and forest land. The season setting in so genially in early spring, joined to the refreshing rains which have since succeeded, have caused rich promise of abundance to appear everywhere. I never remember feeling so intimately how bounteous a mother is this fair earth, yielding such plenteous store of food to her children, and this food in its growth so beautiful to look on. How full of gratitude and love for the Creator does the beauty of the creation make us. By a sort of slovenly reasoning, we tell ourselves that, since we are born, sustenance is our due, but that all beyond, the beauty of the world, and the sensations of transport it imparts, springs from the immeasurable goodness of our Maker. True, we were also created to experience those emotions. God has not reduced our dwelling place, as Puritans would his, to a bare meeting house. All there is radiant in glorious colors, all imparts supreme felicity to the senses and the heart. Next to the consciousness of right and honor, God has shown that he loves best beauty and the sense of beauty, since he has endowed the visible universe so richly with the one, and made the other so keen and deep-seated an enjoyment in the hearts of his creatures. We passed through Chalons-sur-Marne, Clermont, and Verdun. The cornfields, the vineyards clothing the uplands, the woods that varied the landscape, and the meandering river that gave it light and life, were all in their fairest summer dress. Plenty and peace brooded over a happy land. From a traveler in a diligence no more detailed description of city, village, or scenery can be expected. I will only add that this was by far the most agreeable part of France I had ever traversed. We had been told at Paris that we should arrive at Metz in time for the diligence to Trèves. Out of England, one does not expect exactness. Still, it was provoking, as we wanted to get on, to find, when arriving at 7 in the morning, that the diligence had started at 6. We needed rest, certainly, and so made up our minds to endure with equanimity the necessity we were under of not fatiguing ourselves to death from a principle of economy. The inn was tolerable, and the table d'hôte sufficiently good, and best praise quietly served. Metz is a clean, pleasant town, a little dull or so, but from the gardens on the ramparts we commanded a view of the hill-surrounded plain in which it is built, with the Moselle flowing peaceably at our feet. We hired a boat and loitered several hours delightfully on the river, but being without a boatman, found difficulty in discovering the main stream amidst a labyrinth of canals and mill dams. Afterwards we walked in the public gardens, which would have been pleasant, but for the foreign style of gravel, which is not gravel, but shingle. Smooth turf and a velvet sward are never found out of England. They don't know what grass means abroad, except to feed horses and cows. The weather meanwhile was fine, the air balmy. It was a day of agreeable idleness. At 6 in the morning we left Metz for Trèves, the distance 55 miles, which occupied us 14 hours. We had now entered the true region of German expedition. The diligence was a sort of char-a-banc with a heavy roof. We had the front seats, but the people behind had ingress and egress only by passing hours, which was done by raising the middle seat, in the style of the public boxes at our theaters. The horses went well enough. I have an idea we only changed them once halfway, but the peculiarity of German traveling consists in its frequent and long stoppages. During each of these, the people behind got out and refreshed themselves by eating and drinking. Another inconvenience resulted from our stopping so often. Our left-hand leader went well enough when once off, but it was very difficult to persuade him to move, and he was never urged by any but the gentlest means. Every time we stopped he refused to set off, on which our driver got down to pat and coax him and feed him with slices of bread. Horses eat a great deal of bread in Germany. When he thought he had succeeded, he mounted again, but the horse being still obstinate, he had to get down and renew his caresses and bits of bread. Sometimes he repeated these maneuvers half a dozen times before he succeeded. Once, just as the horse, after showing himself particularly self-willed, had deigned to yield, a passenger behind, a simple-looking bumpkin, started forward, exclaiming in accents of distress, "Oh, mon gâteau!" He had bought a cake, but by some accident had left it behind, and he entreated the driver to stop that he might recover it. This was too much. A full quarter of an hour's coaxing and much bread could not thus be wasted, all to be begun over again. The fields on the roadside were planted with cherry trees, which, for the purpose of distilling Kirchenwasser, abound all over Germany. The fruit was ripe, and the heavily laden branches hung over the road. Our outside passengers helped themselves plentifully, so that in a short time we were pursued by a hue and cry of peasants. There is a heavy fine for robbing cherry trees, and these people wanted to be paid. Fierce objurgations passed, and a frequent use of the word Schwein, the most opprobrious name a German can give or receive. The peasants had the worst and got nothing. We stopped nearly 2 hours at Thionville for dinner. In the same room, at the other end of the same table, a civic feast was prepared, delayed only by the non-arrival of the sous-prefect. He came at last, and was joyously welcomed. But here German was the usual language, and we became worse than deaf, for we heard but could not understand. Thionville is pleasantly situated in the valley of the Moselle, close to the river. It was the eve of some great feast in honor of the Virgin, and all the girls around were erecting altars and triumphal arches, and adorning them with waxen figures in full dress, and quantities of flowers and ribbons. They were enjoying themselves greatly and very proud of their handiwork. Soon after leaving Thionville, we arrived at the Prussian frontier. There was but one passenger besides ourselves, and he only had any taxable goods, sugar plums from Nancy. Our luggage was taken down and some portion of it slightly inspected. The necessary ceremony was soon over, but 2 hours were loitered away, one knew not wherefore. The people were civil and the day fine, so we did not feel inclined to be discontented. The country after this grew more varied and pleasant, but the villages deteriorated dismally. They were indescribably squalid. The dung before the doors, the filth of the people, the wretched appearance of the cottages formed a painful contrast, which too often presents itself to the traveler, between the repulsive dwellings of man and the inviting aspect of free beautiful nature, all elegant in its forms, delicious in its odors, and peaceful in its influence over the mind. As we slowly proceeded and were entering a village, a violent thunderstorm came on. The driver drew up the diligence to the roadside, and he and the conducteur and all the outside passengers took shelter in an inn, where they remained drinking beer while the storm lasted. After we had proceeded thence about 3 miles, our fellow passenger, who had appeared a mild, quiet German and had been conversing good-humoredly with us, discovered that he had been taken beyond his place of destination, which was indeed the village where we had stopped during the storm. This he considered the fault of the conducteur and flew into the most violent rage. We escaped the benefit of his angry language since we did not understand him. He and his portmanteau were left under a tree, looking helpless enough, and we went on. The disagreeable part of a slow style of traveling is that although at the outset we take it patiently and may find it even amusing, yet when we are to reach a definite bourne and the hours pass, and apparently we are still as far off as ever, we become excessively weary. The country was pretty, and after the shower, the evening wore a garb of sober grey not unpleasing. But our fatigue increased rapidly, and mile after mile we proceeded, not interspersed with the capricious and ludicrous stoppages that had marked our outset, but in a sort of determined jog-trot that showed that the men and horses had lost the gay spirit which had led them to play with their work, and were seriously set upon finishing it with all the slow haste of which they were capable. We arrived at Trèves at 10 o'clock last night. The inn El Hotel de Trèves is the best we have yet met with. The civility and alacrity with which we are served is quite comforting, as well as the cleanliness of the house and the ultimate moderation of the charges. Our first care on arriving has been to arrange for descending the Moselle. There is no steamer, one is promised for next year, but for the present there is only a passage boat twice a week, Thursday and Saturday, and this is Monday. Upon inquiry, we learn that we can hire a tolerably commodious boat, with 3 men to work her at no extravagant price. We have found also at the hotel 2 young Cantabs, friends of one of our party, bent on the same voyage, on their way to a tour in Switzerland. They have agreed to join us. By early rising and late arriving, we might accomplish the descent in 2 days. We prefer a more easy style of proceeding. We are to sleep 2 nights on shore and occupy the better part of 3 days going down the river. Trèves, or as the Germans call it, Trier, is a very interesting town, as being one of the oldest in the northern part of Europe. It was a metropolis, we are told, before the time of Julius Caesar. After the Roman conquest and during the decay of the empire, it was the center of northern civilization. During the Middle Ages, until the time of the French Revolution of 1789, it flourished as the capital of an archbishopric, such as existed in Germany, where the mitre was united rather to the sword and scepter than to the crosier. It is now in a state of decay, but venerable in its fall. The old Roman ruins give token of that magnificent spirit which causes the steps of the masters of the world to be made evident everywhere, through the solidity, grandeur, and utility of their works. My friends have been rambling about the town and are returned highly delighted. I did not go, for I felt very much fatigued. I repent me now, but it is too late. We left Trèves soon after noon. Our boat was rude enough, but tolerably large. A queer-looking old man steered her, and the oars were held by 2 young fellows, one with an aspect of intelligence and good humor, the son of the old man, the other belonging to a grade beneath him in the human scale. Our luggage was piled aft, and we had an awning. Thus, on a fine, but not hot, June day, we pushed off from Trèves, and full of curiosity and expectation of pleasure, dropped down the swift stream between verdant banks that rose into hills, not striking in their outline, but agreeable to the eye, while frequent villages, each with its church and pointed spire, either nestled in the foldings of the hills or graced some promontory that formed a bend in this much-winding river. Peace seemed to brood over and lull us, a deeper peace, as at evening the green shadows of the mountains gathered on the quiet river, and now and then a ruined castle crowned a height, and with that peculiar impression of stately tranquility which a time-honored ruin imparts, added the touch of romantic dignity which otherwise had been wanting to the scene. We arrived at Peaceport at 7, and our boatmen counseled us to remain here for the night. One of the gentlemen who had joined us had studied German for this tour, and a very necessary accomplishment we found it. Nothing can be more futile than the idea that French will carry a traveler through Germany or Italy. At some of the best inns on the most frequented routes, waiters are provided who can talk both French and English, but go ever so little off the high road, or address a person not especially put there for the benefit of your ignorance, and you are instantly at fault. And wanderers, like ourselves, if they cannot speak the language of the country, 9 times out of 10, run every risk of not obtaining the necessaries of life. We had been told on this occasion that one of our boatmen spoke French, but oui and non and bonjour was the extent of his vocabulary, and we could never make him understand a word we said. We took great interest, therefore, in our friend's first experiment in German, and his success was a common triumph. Peaceport is a miserable village, with a miserable inn, and it was matter of difficulty to procure beds for so large a party. The rooms looked dirty and disconsolate, but there was no help. We ordered supper, coffee and eggs, and our great staple of consumption throughout Germany, fried potatoes, and with the agreeable promise of the excellent wine. Of the country, we hoped to restore our fatigues. While all this was preparing, we walked up a hill and looked down on the windings of the river and the green hills that closed around to guard and shelter it. We encountered a poor stray firefly on our road, flashing a pale, sickly light. How it came there, who can tell? It looked lost and out of place. We left Peaceport at 5 in the morning. The mists gathered chill, white, and dank around us. We met many barges towed up the stream by horses up to their middles in the cold, foggy river. The hills grew higher and steeper, broken into precipice and peak, crowned by ruined towers and castles. To a certain degree, it might be called a miniature Rhine, yet it had a peculiar character of its own, more still, more secluded than the nobler river. There were no country seats, no large towns nor cities, but the villages, each with its spire and overlooked by a ruined tower on a neighboring height, succeeded to each other frequently. At 8 o'clock we arrived at Bernkastel. By the windings of the river it was 15 miles to Trarbach. Across the hills it was but 3. Our boatman advised us to cross the hill, as the boat thus lightened would make speedier way. Accordingly, with the morning before us, we left the boat at Bernkastel and ordered breakfast. My companions scrambled up a steep hill to a ruined castle that overhung the village. We had a good breakfast and then began our walk. The hill was very steep, the day very warm. I never remember finding the crossing of a mountain so fatiguing. The path was good, not broken into zigzags, but for that reason steeper, and after the fatigue of the ascent, the descent became absolutely painful. At length we reached Trarbach. It was market day, and the high street was thronged. One plenteous article of merchandise was cherries. We gave a few groschen, and in return bore off many pounds. The woman who sold them seemed never tired of heaping up our basket. The boat arrived soon after, and repose was delightful after our laborious walk. The finest scenery of the Moselle occurs after leaving Trarbach, but words are vain, and in description there must ever be at once a vagueness and a sameness that conveys no distinct ideas, unless it should awaken the imagination. Unless you can be placed beside us in our rough-hewn boat and glide down between the vine-covered hills, with bare, craggy heights towering above, now catching with glad curiosity the first glimpse of a more beautiful bend of the river, a higher mountain peak, a more romantic ruin, now looking back to gaze as long as possible on some picturesque point of view, of which, as the boat floated down but slightly assisted by the rowers, we lost sight forever, unless you can imagine and sympathize in the cheerful elasticity of the setting out at morning, sharpened into hunger at noon, and the pleasure that attended the rustic fare we could command, especially accompanied, as it was by bright pure Moselle wine. Then, the quiet enjoyment of golden evening, succeeded by still and grey twilight, and last, the lassitude, fatigue which made us look eagerly out for the place where we were to stop and repose. There is a zest in all this, especially on a voyage unhackneyed by others, and therefore accompanied by a dash of uncertainty and a great sense of novelty, which is lost in mere words. You must do your part, and feel and imagine, or all description proves tame and useless. We arrived at Kochheim at 10, and found a comfortable inn. In the salamanger was a respectable-looking man, apparently some sort of merchant. He could talk English, and we entered into conversation with him. I observed that it was sad to see the wretched villages and the destitution of the inhabitants, and this in a land which yielded such lucrative produce as Moselle wine, the sale of which must render the landed proprietors rich, while the mere cultivators languished in penury. The man replied that it was not so. The villagers were well off, having all they desired, all they wanted. During the French Revolution, he said, the nobles forfeited their estates, which were mostly bought up by the peasants, and consequently these rich vineyards belonged to the cultivators. It was true that the trade was carried on by wine merchants who made large profits, but the peasants might do better if they chose. They were, however, cut off from the rest of the world. They lived as their fathers had done before them, and had no ideas or wishes beyond their present style of life. They had enough and were content. We left Kochheim at 8. The day grew warm, but a breeze sprung up, which helped us on our way. The vine-clad hills still sheltered the river, still villages with their spires occurred frequently, and still the landscape was distinguished and ennobled by the ruins of feudal towers and castles. At about 4 o'clock, we reached the mouth of the Moselle as it joins the Rhine. Our boatman wished to land us on the bank of the Moselle itself. We naturally desired to enter the Rhine and land close to an hotel. They declared it was impossible, the stream was too swift, but they spoke to incredulous ears. Some of my companions had before this relieved the men in their work, being accustomed to pulling at Cambridge. 2 now took the oars. The old man continued to steer. The rowers did not find the stream very difficult to stem, working as they did with a will. The old boatman steered us near the banks, among the numerous barges, apparently with some malice, to bring us into difficulty. On one occasion, indeed, it appeared as if we should be inevitably run down by a large barge, and my maid screamed and wanted to jump overboard to save herself. A stroke of the oar saved us. We had not far to go. We landed at the bridge and betook ourselves to the Hotel Bellevue, close at hand. The German hotels are all conducted with great order and regularity, and are very clean, quiet, and good. The head waiter is the responsible person. He is paid for all the other servants, and the usual sum, a franc a day for every master, is reasonable enough, as it includes everyone, and the traveller is not laid in wait for by sighing chambermaid or imploring boots. The only fault is that the eating is carried on in the common room, where Germans smoke and consider fresh air unhealthy. The Bellevue is one of 3 first-rate hotels at Koblenz. The Gient, however, is the largest and enjoys the best reputation. There is a good one, I believe, on the other side of the river. This day was passed on board the steamer going to Mayence. We embarked at 10 in the morning. Years had elapsed since I had passed down this river, before steamers were in use, in an ungainly boat, managed in a still more ungainly manner. Memory had painted the Rhine as a scene of enchantment, and the reality came up to what I remembered. The inferior beauty of the banks of the Moselle enhanced still more the prouder and more romantic glories of the Rhine. The promontories stood in bolder relief. The ruined castles and their ramparts were more extensive and more majestic. The antique spires and Gothic abbeys spoke of a princely clergy, and the extent of mouldering walls marked cities belonging to a more powerful population. Each tower-crowned hill, each picturesque ruin, each shadowy ravine and beetling precipice was passed and gazed upon with eager curiosity and delight. The very names are the titles of volumes of romance. All the spirits of old Germany haunt the place. Even the events of modern days have added an interesting tale. When the German soldiers, led by Blücher, and driving the proud fallen victor before them, beheld the river honored by them, so late occupied by the enemy they hated, now open and free, the name of the Rhine burst from many thousand voices, accompanied by tears of ecstasy. Someday I should like much to establish myself for a summer on the banks of this river and explore its recesses. As we glide by, we obtain but a cursory and unsatisfactory survey. One longs to make a familiar friend of such sublime scenery and refer, in after years, to one's intimate acquaintance with it, as one of the most valued among the treasures of recollection which time may have bestowed. We were a large party in ourselves and enjoyed our voyage greatly, but as evening came on, we left the more picturesque part of the river and grew weary as still we did not arrive. When it became dark, we saw, looming up the river, a shadowy bark, with bright lanterns at its masthead. What boat was that? The steamer that had left Koblenz at 4 hours later than ourselves. It neared, it passed us. "Oui, quand marqué plus vite que nous," replied the phlegmatic German captain to our accents of surprise and discontent. To go ahead never entered his mind as desirable. One boat went quick, the other slow. That was all the difference. Their day's work was the same. To us, however, the difference involved, besides great unnecessary weariness, our comfort for the night. We did not arrive at Mayence till near midnight, and we were preceded by our rival, which, together with another steamer, had reached the pier and disgorged their passengers. We had first to seize on porters to carry our luggage, which, for our large party, was multifarious, and without the aid of our friend who spoke German, I know not how we should have managed it. We went to the best inn. It was quite full. The next, there appeared some hope, but it failed us. We were driven at last to a very mediocre one, but though we were godsends to these people, they were neither rude nor exorbitant. On the contrary, they received us with a sort of cordiality. Their accommodation was bad, but they made up for it by civility. We were very tired and very glad to go to bed. We left Mayence early. Our plan had been to go by the last train of the previous night to Frankfurt. Balked of this, we arranged to go by the earliest of this morning. Here we separated from our chance companions, as they stopped to view the lions at Mayence and were destined for Strasbourg, with which city we meant to have nothing to do. The railroad from Mayence to Frankfurt is not a very good one, but the carriages were comfortable and the way short, 21 miles, which we did in little more than an hour. We went, guide-directed by the inestimable Murray, to the Hotel de Russie, a most excellent one. Frankfurt looks a clean, airy, but dull town. We have walked about it a good deal, but seen nothing worthy of remark. We missed, by stupidly not making proper inquiries, viewing the Ariadne of Danica, which is held in high estimation as among the best modern sculpture. I am not well all this time, and tormented by a cough that fatigues me greatly. We have dined at the table d'hôte, which is thronged by English, and at the hotel the waiters all speak English and are cross if you speak French, as they want to practice. A bargain has been made this evening with a voiturier to take us to Schaffhausen for 11 Napoleons. We were to stop a whole day at Baden-Baden and reach our destination on the 7th day after leaving Frankfurt.